Coming up next on Passion Struck.
Politicians, members of the royal family, artists, writers, musicians, actors, producers, dignitaries. I've worked with so many people from different classes of life. That's the one thing I notice they all share in common is that when it's go time, it's grow time. They lock into something really, really narrowly. I've called it the zoom factor. When you look at the zoom factor, it's like the function of your telephoto lens. And for some people, they might look at their camera and say, like, that has a zoom lens as well. When you zoom in on something, when you take that which is far and you bring it close, nothing else matters. Nothing else matters. Taking something that's out there and bringing it right here, so that's all that matters. That's what they share all in common.
Welcome to Passion Struck. Hi, I'm your host, John R. Miles, and on the show, we decipher the secrets, tips, and guidance of the world's most inspiring people and turn their wisdom into practical advice for you and those around you. Our mission is to help you unlock the power of intentionality so that you can become the best version of yourself. If you're new to the show, I offer advice and answer listener questions on Fridays. We have long-form interviews the rest of the week with guests ranging from astronauts to authors, CEOs, creators, innovators, scientists, military leaders, visionaries, and athletes. Now, let's go out there and become Passion Struck.
I am absolutely honored and thrilled today to have my friend Richard Dolan on Passion Struck. What's up, man?
Hey, man, so good to be here with you, my brother.
Yeah, I have been wanting to get this thing scheduled for a while, ever since I saw you at Jim Quick's book launch. I have to ask, how did you become the one MC for that event?
Oh, man, because Jim loves me and I love him too. That's why. That's why. But I mean, all kidding aside, I think as we've talked off air before we got started and we were comparing sort of battle notes on how, we make progress and open doors and get into the networks. I mean, when you're able to handle and or work with or be a complement to people who are instruments for impact and you kind of carry some of their bags, if it were, you'd be surprised how much things they carry. And in Jim Quick's case, I mean, between launching a book, he's got hands to shake and interviews to do and a network to groom and relationships to pacify. I mean, folks who are in that particular position have lots going on. So for folks like me and folks like you who are published and accomplished, we're speakers and sought after thought leaders, sometimes to just kind of check your ego and let it go so you can be of service to the people who are serving others is a pretty powerful place to be.
I've been to a few book launches, but that one had to be one of the most dynamic ones I've ever been to. Just the whole setup, and I couldn't believe how many people he had there. He must have had 400 books at least, and by the time we were all gone, all the books were gone. So,
And you can't think nor assert that he would have grabbed just anybody off the street because it was actually on an island within a beach community of Miami. So there was no stragglers on the streets, if it were. It was a gated community. So everyone was there by invitation with intention. And I mean, look, Jim Quick is definitely one of the standards of the industry. If you look at those in an industry that we're in and we share, the human betterment business, dare I say, Jim has been around for over 3 decades and he's been at it, making a difference, producing great IP. So I think when you nurture your community, great things can happen. And a real great example of that, I think probably the gold standard is like a Taylor Swift. When you do great things by your fans, your followers, your faithful, great things can happen. And Jim is no exception to the rule. He certainly does lead by example, and he's a living demonstration of that point.
yeah, I'm not sure I ever told you this story, but when I was talking to Jim, I was asking him about his childhood background where he calls himself the boy with the broken brain. And the interesting thing is that I had the same thing happen to me, different circumstances. But when I was 5 years old, we were playing tag on the side of our yard and we started getting rougher and rougher. And I was running away from my friend and he pushed me from behind and I went crashing through the basement window and ended up having a traumatic brain injury and caused a lot of issues after that. So, as I was looking at your story, you also experienced some struggles when you were growing up, but from a different perspective. You grew up kind of in a mixed family. And in Toronto at that time, I imagine people saw people as black or white, but you were different. How did that impact school and some of the struggles you might have faced?
Well, and I think speaking of broke, I mean, I didn't get a chance to break my neck, my back, or my brain, but I grew up broke. I mean, for a lot of people, growing up broke sounds about right. And so, being broke and in a very low to bottom class society and born to a very interracial family where my mother was one color, my father was another, those were clear boundaries crossed and or compromised back in that time. I mean, I was born in the early 70s, and as a result, you grow up in a time where that was not something that was looked upon as, well, encouraging. It wasn't something that people smiled about. And it was certainly not something that had its own voice, movement, or an intention to get adopted quickly. So for Toronto and anybody who was Canadian, I mean, Canada is definitely known as one of the most multicultural oriented populations in the world, nearly 40 million to this day. The country stands to bring in about 1 million people a year from different countries in all walks of life. And it's what makes Canada so magical, powerful, dare I say, even diverse. But at that time, it was just when things got started to really bring in people from different walks of life, cultures, and colors. And it created its own difficulties. So when you start having kids that start to ask you, well, are you this? And you say no. And well, are you that? And you say no. It's almost like you have to identify with how the world sees you. So for a child who doesn't really understand what color even means, I see what color is, but I don't make it mean something growing up. I think if you're 5 or 6, kids don't say black or white. They don't say Christian or Buddhist. They don't say Democrat or Republican. They just see you for what you are for them, and largely just fun. I mean, the white kid is a lot more fun than that kid, or that kid's a lot more fun than that kid. And it's like, that's how we were as kids. And so, I mean, and that might be a difficult thing to say today. So, but back then it was hard. So you're right, John. It was really hard to grow up. I didn't want to identify as one class or another, or from that country or the next, because they always got it wrong because I was a mix, and a mix was wrong. A mix was like, that's the bad batch. A mix was the rut of the family. It was an outcast. It was a black sheep, and as a result, it was really hard to really fit in. So that was a tough time. I mean, for sure, especially being an inner city child, it was a tough time to be able to grow up through that.
Yeah, I grew up going to parochial schools, but I remember from the time I was in third grade through middle school, we had this boy, Danny Holt, who went to school with us, and he was mixed. And I just remember how ostracized he got from everyone else. And you would have thought at a Christian school like that, you would have had more acceptance, but that was certainly not the case. And I remember at times feeling really, really bad for him.
And as you know, as an author and a speaker and someone who understands, human development technologies, it's pressure that gives rise to diamonds. And I think if it wasn't for that one particular part, aside from coming out of a broken home and aside from having a struggle through school and having had learning disabilities and having had a real tough time to just grow up in a tough neighborhood the way I did, an inner city, projects on the perimeter, and the rise of hip hop and urban culture all at the same time. The reality was, I think that's what gave rise to the person I became. If it wasn't for that mixture of complex and crisis, concern and confidence, I wouldn't have become the person I am. I wouldn't be the leader I am, the business owner I am, the advisor I am to the people I am, counted on and trusted and sought after for. And I wouldn't be the impact I am in the world today. So I think I'm very grateful for that difficult and trying time. I wouldn't want to wish that upon anybody, but at the same time, I'm glad it happened to me.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. And as I was looking at your background, I think that there are defining moments or events or things that have a profound influence on us. And you, instead of going down the route that so many people could have into alcohol, drugs, etc., life on the street, you end up discovering Gordon Gekko. And Wall Street is one of the best movies ever. I think that was probably his best acting to this day, I still think. But how did that movie and his character shape your approach going forward to want to have financial success and lead you into entrepreneurship?
I mean, that's a great catch. And that's a big part of my story for sure. And I think we all have aha moments, whether it's a lightning strike and or the rolling thunder. There's things, there's signs, there's signals, there's statements and or conversations that you enter and or are around that shape your decisions and your view of life, and therefore the things you value in life. And then, of course, become the pursuits in your life. So for me, you're right. And watching that movie, Wall Street, at around the age of 16, it was amazing to see that movie ignited something in me. Dare I say, and can I borrow, passion struck by the idea that was a world I can see myself in. That was a world, for those who aren't familiar with the movie, Oliver Stone's depiction of how Wall Street looked in the roaring 80s, where you had the villain and you had the innocent, and you had the mix, and you had the crisis and the climax and the denouement. But in the story arc, it was just really a great review of how Wall Street rocked, how stockbrokers moved stock, how money was made and how it was spent, and how lifestyles were achieved, but also lives were broken. And so I didn't want to imitate the things I saw in the movie. I wanted to emulate what I saw in the movie. I wanted to be in that world. I wanted to be amongst that buzz. I wanted to be in those conversations in that suit with that tie with the brick phone on a beach and saying, rise and shine, another day, another dollar, money never sleeps. I said, man, that sounds talking to me. So for me, I feel like a lot of people who today talk about going out there somewhere and finding your purpose, like somehow you were separated from birth from it and you're in search all your life for purpose. I think sometimes when you think it's out there, you miss the opportunity of creating it over here. So for me, in that moment, I made a decision that that's something I wanted to lean into and learn more about. And it was a catalyst that started a learning curve that then led me into the financial services business. But as a high school dropout, John, and as someone who didn't go to an Ivy League school, or certainly didn't come from the Lucky Sperm Club, I had no way of getting into that industry at that time. I'm talking like early 90s, 91 to be exact. You couldn't just walk into a stock brokerage firm, but I lucked out where I actually did. And I walked into a firm that later became Merrill Lynch and said, hey, I want to apply for a job. And luckily for me, there was a broker who was looking for a cold caller, someone that picks up the phone and dials coldly every day, all day, looking for ways to open up accounts. And I got that job. And I was making 300 cold calls a day, every day as a full-time job. And that was the bottom of the bottom. I think even a janitor got paid more than me. I mean, really. So, but I'm happy I did it because that's what got me in.
Yeah, I want to go back to that for a second because sometimes people in their life experience jobs like that where you're in this position where you were just hustling. You're probably it's not the dream position you had, but you knew it was a stepping stone. How do you put yourself thinking back to that time in the right mental position to understand that when you're given an opportunity like this, you need to double down and just go after it because of the unknown potential positive things that it can bring in your life? I think sometimes people find themselves in that space and they resist it or they're like, this is beneath me or something like that. What changed for you in that circumstance?
Yeah, I think what's important for a lot of people to understand is that I wasn't so addicted or attached to it having to look a certain way. I just wanted to be that way. So I wasn't so much concerned about what job I had. I was just happy to be in the place I was, amongst the people I was, in the building I was. I mean, I was on the 32nd floor of the most prestigious financial services building in my city, overlooking the water, overseeing the horizon. I mean, I was somewhere that people who were somebodies went to work. And so I was proud to be there. And I think we get really caught up in having to have the right watch and the right suit and drive the right car and all that sort of stuff. So in our own minds, we get to match outside who we believe we are inside. Because after all, we're all living legends in our mind. But for me, I had no legendary in my mind. I was really happy to have been in. I was happy to be included. And quite frankly, quite the opposite, I was scared to get found out. It's almost like somehow my ticket got me onto seats that were such great view. I was like, are you sure these are my seats? I can't believe I'm in these seats. They weren't the best, but they weren't the worst. And I thought to myself, I really hope no one comes down here and calls me out on these tickets because, man, I'm in some really great seats. I had a great seat. I had a great seat in the fastest growing industry of the time, and which remains to be at this time, the financial services and wealth management business. And I had a front row seat in an industry that was really reserved for the accomplished, the educated, the connected, the lucky. And I was none of those. So I was just really happy to be there. So for me, it wasn't about having the dream job. It was about being in the dream place. For me, I was really happy to be there, to be included, and to be a part of a, dare I say, a community, dare I say, a culture that was grooming me from the feet up into the person I am today.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. And it's interesting how different our lives were when we were both 23, 24. I'm overseas, deployed in the military in combat zones, doing multiple deployments. And at the same time, you're co founding Infinity Mutual Funds. And I bring this up because this endeavor of yours that you were talking about, the starting aspects of, ends up amassing over $1 billion in assets, if I have it correct. How did that early success end up shaping your path and influence the transitions in your life to now getting into real estate? And I'm very interested in then getting into self improvement.
Mhm. I mean, if there's a word that I would encourage your listeners to write down right now would be the word mentorship. I didn't know what mentorship even was. I didn't even understand how it was defined back then. But what I didn't realize was I came under the mentorship of some really incredible people. Unfortunately, all men. I didn't have the chance to get mentored by any ladies. I wasn't that lucky. And who knows, maybe I would have turned out even better. I think I would. But for these men, they were the top of class. These were the men who were most revered, most celebrated, most declarated in that space. And speaking of declaration, by the way, thank you, my friend, for your service for all people who are on deployments and people who are all around the world, whether past, present, or yet to be. If it wasn't for you, none of us would be able to do what we do. So thank you for that. But back to being declarated, I mean, the people I worked with were real heroes, I mean, of the industry. So for me, I just want one small correction. I wasn't necessarily a co-founder of the mutual fund, but I was a part of the co-founding groups. So, and that might be me just deflecting a little bit. I mean, was I an owner? Yes. Did I own shares? Yes. Did I know what that even meant back then? No. But I was grateful that I was included in the founding groups that created some incredible financial stories that today remain legendary. I mean, that particular fund was the first to hit $1 billion in assets in record time, 8 months, 1 billion, and it's never been matched again in the Canadian financial markets history ever again. So it says a lot about our marketing prowess and our ability to go out there, raise money, and rattle the troops. So for me, I think mentorship was key. I was able to be a part of history where I wanted to speak like them, dress like them, be the part. Now, remember, I said earlier on, I didn't want to be found out. Remember, I didn't want to be found out. I sat in my seat, so to speak, like I owned it, like I bought it. Like I didn't expect anybody to check my seat. So I acted as if, I behaved as if, I spoke as if. So a lot of people oftentimes when they unpack my history and especially looking at my track record and the things that I do, they're like, one of the questions they do ask is, how did you become that way? And I think it goes back to, here it comes, that time, working with the legends and the icons and the leaders in the space and wanting to be the part so that I can at least fit in, not necessarily get canceled out. And so for me, it wasn't because I was the smartest, because I wasn't, and it wasn't because I was the most successful. It was because I was the hardest working at doing just that, fitting in, being a contribution, being a compliment to the team. In fact, maybe even being a great compliment to the team in some way, shape, or form. One small, quick example. So if a financial advisor had clients coming in and they were expected to, meet with the financial advisor, meet with the investment planner, and be able to sit down and talk about one's money, I would be the one who'd be in charge of greeting the client at the door because I found them. But nobody, John, nobody greeted that client better than me. I mean, I would go out there and I would introduce myself and welcome those people and ask if their parking ticket was taken care of and to make sure that their parking was to their liking. I want to make sure that the temperature in the office was fine and if there was anything we could do to make their time here even more pleasant. Whatever it is the couple asked for, whether it was a cappuccino, which was not heard of back then, or a cup of tea, whether it was a glass of wine, but a special Bordeaux but from a particular region, I would always say, we've got it. And you want to know something, John? We didn't have anything. I would run downstairs into either a restaurant or into the food court or down the street. Even once I went 5 blocks to a liquor store to grab the thing that my client wanted. And I would bring it back as if it was already in our kitchen waiting for them to arrive and for it to be poured on ice or however they liked. And so I was hospitable because I was grateful, and I was grateful because I was a part of something special. So I think mentorship drives us not to just emulate the people mentoring you, but mentorship also is like the debt you can never pay off. So you're always being your best version for the mentor. You're always bringing your best in gratitude to who they are and what they've become for you. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. And mentorships and having that support structure are one of the most important things anyone who's successful needs to lean on, because none of us can do this on our own.
You better believe it, buddy. None of us. And we all become what some people would say, destined to be. What I would say is that we all become what our pasts have programmed us for. And whatever you cause and you create is by intention and design and not by default. So a big part of who I could have been a lot more of the same of the neighborhood I came from. As you said, whether being on drugs or alcohol. And I mean, all those things are true. And a lot of my friends got into stuff like that, and I love them all. But I never became anything close to the template of my past. I could have and should have been a number of other things, but was not any of them because of the fact that I was in an environment with caring professionals who wanted to see the best for themselves and therefore saw me as an instrument, right, to be leveraged for their purpose. And as a result, I was able to become a great instrument for impact in different places.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I wanted to just go over some of the core tenets of Passion Struck, because I'm going to allude to this as we go through the interview today. I love the book Grit by Angela Duckworth. And when I was first reading it, she starts out by talking about cadets from West Point, and that the reason that they ended up getting through Beast Barracks and then graduating was the combination of their physical abilities combined with passion and perseverance being the two most important. And she found that talent or intelligence really didn't matter in the big scheme of things in their success. And I went to the Naval Academy, so I have a very comparable experience to these cadets. And as I looked at this and my own experience, passion and perseverance were absolutely critical. But to something you just brought up, I thought she missed an important element of the triangle, and that was intentional. Being intentional about how you were pursuing the goals in accordance with your values. And so to me, it's really that combination of what she calls grit and intentionality, which is what I found was the secret ingredient to how I've lived my life and why I think people graduate from the academies or go on to do things like you have. So when I think of someone who's passion struck, they are intentionally carrying out the micro choices or actions of their days in accordance with their values, aspirations, and ambitions. And it's this intentionality that catches you when you're not on track and you need to course correct. It's this intentionality that also helps you realize your core values and the need to follow them. When I look back upon Gordon Gekko, I wouldn't have thought in a million years he is an honest person or full of integrity. And oftentimes that's what we think of when you think of the finance and wealth management space. How did you maintain your own integrity, and how much value did you put on your own core values as you were building your career in this competitive world?
Well, that's a really great question. I mean, first of all, bravo on your observations on the people that you've learned from and were inspired by. That's number one. I mean, great books that do great things are always, I mean, great catalysts for more. You speak to the term intention, and by definition, it really does come down to focus. I mean, when you really look at intention, it's by definition, it's a determination to act in a certain way. I mean, that's where resolve lives. Resolve lives in intention. So oftentimes people will always say that I've got goals and I've got aspirations and I've got an objective today. But when you have an intention, it's kind of like I would rather plant the keystone with intention than great aspiration. So for me, understanding what that word means is very important. But to get to your next question around intention that leads to integrity, I mean, that was actually a struggle. I'm glad you brought it up. To be honest, for me, as the industry began to weaponize my motivation and my aspirations to do really well, I was shipped out to workshops and seminars and summits and conferences to really galvanize and fortify this motivated kid who just seemed to have gotten the job done. And so whether we call that making me better at marketing or sales, I mean, I would come back on fire to simply do what I was designed to do, which was drive sales, find leads, convert into business, and grow more. But it was during that time when the self-development, leadership development space went through a little bit of a transformation itself. And what I mean by a transformation is we began to look inward more so than outward. So it was about producing results out there. It was like, try this technology, take on this modality, look at this model to do that. And at that time that I entered that space, the industry as a whole began to, well, shift, and it had you look inward. So lucky for me, and I do mean like timing is everything, when I entered that space, it's all started to become about me and where the source of success was. So it was a real conundrum. There's a word for the day, John. It was a conundrum because I didn't hear the word integrity in that industry ever. I mean, today you'll hear it all the time because it's an extension of compliance and regulation, playing by the rules and doing good by clients. And by the way, all I agree with. But when you really think about it, the industry wasn't built on the bedrock of integrity for clients. How can it be? It's not performance oriented. It's not performance based. It's not guaranteeing results for clients. It actually is the place where you take a chance, you make the calculated risk, and you could make money and you could lose money, and that's legal, right? It's legal, just like gambling. You can go to the casino and place a bet, and should you lose, even though the odds are against you, that's fair trade. That's fair game. And so I have to say that that industry, I don't believe, in my opinion, was built on the bedrock of values and principles, one of which was integrity. It couldn't have been. It's impossible. Otherwise, how did people lose money in the stock market? How did people lose money in fixed income derivatives? How could money be lost if investment made zero return, but the fees depleted the principal over time, eroding the principal invested once before? If that's not integrity loss, I don't know what would be. So I think that's why it's going through its own radical innovation and disruptive measures. But back to the point, I have to say it was tough. And that's what led me to leaving the industry eventually. What led me to leave the industry is I had my own, you can tell that movies really inspired me, but I had my own Jerry Maguire moment where in the movie Jerry Maguire, a real life person played by Tom Cruise, has this eureka, has this aha moment where he's like, we're putting athletes in harm's way for the sake of us making money. No more. And he broke out on his own with one client, with one absolute client, which was Cuba Gooding Jr. And that's what he did. And he just focused on the relationship. So for me, I left the industry at the time when I believed that I was no longer being an instrument for good. I believed that the industry was wrong. And I believe, in my personal opinion, that we have tragically misled people into believing what a financial life should look like. It broke my heart. And so that's how I actually transitioned out and into the real estate world. I abandoned the space. I sold out. I cashed out. I did well, and I was grateful for that. And I always give accolades to my beginnings, to my financial services start. But that's how I exited and got into the real estate business. I really lost faith and confidence in that old world.
I just wanted to touch on something there for a second. And that is, people are probably going to ask me, why did you decide to have Richard Dolan on an alternative health podcast? And the thing I want the listeners to know is your financial health is one of the most important factors of making you feel that you're complete in life. So you need to have your mental health, you need to have your physical health, your emotional health, your spiritual health, relationship health, etc. But you also need to be well versed in financial health. And when I think of, my daughter who just graduated high school and is now a sophomore in college, and my son, I don't think, at least here in the States, that our school system is really teaching our kids some of the most important life skills. One of the most important ones being, how do you create financial wellness and health through your life? Because I think it's one of the most important things that we need. And speaking of high school students, Richard, I have a bunch, I'm happy to say, of high school students and college students, a growing cadre of them who are listening to this show. And I always like to ask people like you, so that they have clear examples of this, because they're going to face it in their own life. Can you give an example of a time speaking of core values, where you potentially rejected a lucrative offer due to a clash in core values? And how did you, at that moment, put your integrity and commitment above making money on your entrepreneurial journey and decision making process?
Well, let me answer the question so that we don't lose track of it. And I want to go back to a statement that you made about the relationship between one's financial life and the state and the quality of their life, and how there is a correlation. And it's important for you to bring it in focus, especially given the nature of your business and the nature of your listenership and the orientation of the conversations you have, John. I don't want to say that I have some profound relationship, or I had a profound relationship or realization of what my core values, my views, and what I valued was intact. I don't think I was that clear, to be really frank. All I know is that there were just some things that didn't sit well with me. I'll give you an example. A very dear friend of mine who is quite the golden child, who is very infamous for having turned a very, very small fledgling online gambling app into a multi-billion-dollar app. Now, when he did that, I had no idea he was up to it, but he then became quite the billionaire as a result. So everything he touched, we knew in our circle, became gold. So when he came to me one day and said, Rich, you got to get invested in this thing called cannabis. I said, cannabis? You mean like marijuana? He's like, yeah. And I've never done marijuana. And so I appreciate anybody that appreciates growing trends. But at that time in my country, having lived at that time in Toronto, Canada was about to legalize provincially, or as you call it, state by state, the use of cannabis and CBD. And so that was going to become a huge, incredible business. And you want to know something? I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it because I couldn't understand how we were legalizing drugs. It just couldn't click for me. And of course, you fast forward, not only does it get legalized, it becomes the greatest gold rush in the financial services business that we've seen in decades. I mean, it was innovative, it was disruptive, and it was quite lucrative. Fast forward, I finally buckle and I end up taking an advisory position with a CBD producer, a cannabis manufacturer, and it quickly sizzled out, which I felt it was the universe's way of telling me, see, we told you it wasn't all that. Now my timing was off and I came in late. It's kind of like grabbing your surfboard when the surf dies down. It was just too late. Good intention, bad timing. And it just taught me something to stick to my values and what feels right. So for me, for anyone listening here, I mean, there's no pressure to galvanize and fortify your values, your views. If you've got them, fantastic, bravo. Teach your friends, your family, share them with others. But for me at that age, I didn't know what I valued really. I just knew what didn't sit right. If it doesn't sit right, it won't be right. And if the gut's off, everything else follows. So that's important to note. But on that note, great segue to return to the statement I wanted to make earlier on, which is this, and this is important for you to write down and remember, all of you, is that the quality of your life is equal and proportionate to the quality of your relationship to your financial life. Your financial life will give rise to a quality of your own life. And I don't just mean like if you've got money, you'll have a great life, or if you've got wealth, you'll have a great life, or if you've got a lot of worth, you'll have a great life. What I'm saying is that the relationship to those things, all things in your financial life, made up of the things you measurably call money or wealth or worth, that relationship matters. Because when you study and look at the greatest source of people's stress in life, true statistic, and I know many are made up, but 91% of visits to the doctor is stress related. And the number one reason that there's stress in someone's life is a financial reason. Not making enough money, not having enough wealth, not pursuing enough worth. So all of that discontent, all of that anxiety has a gut burn. It has a real acidic measure in your life. So when you get your financial life right, you get all things in your life right. Your health, your wellness, your vitality, your quality of sleep, your quality of skin and hair quality. I mean, everything else matters. So to John's point, you're right. When you get your financial life right, everything else follows.
I wanted to ask you a follow on question to this, because you have ended up coaching tons of people now to financial freedom. But part of this is you've worked with some very high profile people. One of the most famous examples of this, and you and I were talking before we decided to do this, I'm a big Michigan Wolverine fan, is Juwan Howard, who unfortunately isn't having his best year at Michigan. but is a great player and a great coach. You were working with him while he was with the Miami Heat, where he won back-to-back NBA championships, I think in 2012, 2013, if I have it right. He actually gifted you rings for the work that you did with him. Incredible. Canadian getting NBA rings. I
Amazing.
was hoping you might be able to share that remarkable story and your role.
Oh man, I'm delighted to, because anytime anyone asks me about a magical story, just it just represents me to the fact that magic does happen, blessings are real, and timing is such a thing. So at the time, I was with my family on a vacation during March break, headed on down to Miami. And as I was there, I had my son with me. He at the time may have been 4 or 5 years old, very small, yeah, probably four. At the time that they were celebrating the Fab Five. So Juwan Howard, who you know and just cited, is a Michigan U guy who was very infamous for having assembled five freshmen who actually became part of this thing called the Fab Five. Now, if you're not familiar with who the Fab Five were, you'll likely know that when I tell you that the long tube socks that were done away with, you get the Fab Five to thank for that. When you go to a basketball game and urban music's playing, like hip hop music's playing, you got the Fab Five to thank for that. When you watch shoes being manufactured and worn on the court to this day, where they did away with the white soles and brought in black soles, you've got the Fab Five to thank for that. Like, they urbanized, dare I say, the game of basketball. So the Fab Five was more than just an athletic phenomenon where they did real well and caused an incredible run, but they also were quite instrumental in the urbanification of the game. So that said, I was a big fan of Juwan Howard, just like you are, and I bumped into him at this restaurant that I was not scheduled to be at and I wasn't supposed to be in. But I bumped into him, and here's how the moment goes. I'm in a small little dining room of a very fancy restaurant, and I wasn't supposed to be there. And like, I mean, it was the kind of time that we just kind of walked off the street and thought, can we get into this restaurant because we were hungry? We weren't really quite dressed the part, but we kind of looked the part. So they led us into the only table that they had available because there was a cancellation like minutes earlier. And it was the kind of John, it was kind of restaurant where I didn't even have my wallet. I actually reached in my pocket, pulled out some cash, and said, "Okay, we can't have salad, and yeah, I don't have enough for dessert. So let's just have a main." And like, that's all we're getting. So that was the kind of moment we had. But I saw Juwan. I kind of made eye contact and thought nothing of it as we wined and dined, and then we left. He made a lovely comment to me and my family saying, "Hey, listen, your son was so well behaved. You must have a magic touch. If you ever want to babysit, we've got a few kids too. We'd love to have you over and babysit ours." I'm like, "You can count me in." And I thought, I was starstruck. I got to be honest. And I had worked with really famous people at that point, but I know who Juwan Howard is. Fab Five, man, Michigan U. Well, I mean, like, right? And I said, "Thank you," shook hands. I said, do you mind if I just take a quick picture? He goes, "I don't mind." I took a quick picture. My son was sleeping on my shoulder, never forget it. And I leave. John, I leave this restaurant. There's gates at the front that open. Security guy says, "Have a nice evening." Doors close. And as soon as it clanked, clink, something struck me. And I thought, oh my God, what have I done? I don't have his phone number. He doesn't have mine. That's an opportunity. What am I, sleepwalking? So I knocked on the gate and I said, "Sir," and I made this up. I said, "I think I forgot something at my table." He goes, "What would it be? I'll go get it." I said, "No. I got to look for it. Do you mind if you just let me back in?" I couldn't tell the guy I wanted to go back in there and talk to a celebrity having dinner at the restaurant. He wouldn't have let me in. So he lets me back in and by myself. And I walked straight back to Juwan Howard. I said, "Look, man, we met for a reason. We connected for a cause. I'm right now at this time in my life developing real estate in faraway places that I think you'd be perfect for, because I know you have a background in real estate," because I knew that about him. And he goes, "You know what, man, that's kind of cool." So I gave him my card and I said, "Call me and let's talk about how maybe we can think about a life after game." John, I sat by my phone for the rest of my trip like a schoolboy waiting for the coach to call me to class, and the phone never rang. So for the remainder of the week I was on this vacation, the phone doesn't ring. I figured to myself, he won't call, and that was the end of it. About 2 weeks passed by, and he finally calls me, and I'm at home. He said, "Hey, it's Juwan Howard. I hope you remember me." I said, "Of course, man, I remember you. Fab Five, man. And he's like, "Well, if you're not doing anything tomorrow, after my shoot around, they're beginning to head into the playoffs." And it was during the Boston series semifinals. He says, "Would you like to have a cup of coffee tomorrow? And maybe we can chat about what you discussed with me." I said, "Fantastic. Absolutely convenient. I'll see you at 12 noon. So I get down there. We have a beautiful coffee. We walk South Beach. And we chatted about his life after game, his aspirations, the things he wanted, what it was like to play with LeBron James at the time, because he had just joined the Miami Heat that year. A very controversial joining of the team, if you recall, the big announcement, the big reveal, the burning of Cleveland Cavalier jerseys, the whole 9 yards, the fact that the industry itself was really on its ear about the assembly of the triple threat, right? The Chris Bosh, the Dwayne Wade, and the LeBron James, the stacked team, if it were. So they were favored to win, but I wasn't really following it as carefully as I should have been. But full candor, we had a beautiful cappuccino and walked and strolled South Beach. Clearly, he was famous because he was constantly approached for pictures and took them graciously. And he says, listen, man, let's get started. Why don't you put together a business plan and let's think about how we can work together. I said, fantastic. I said, well, you know what? As soon as I land and get home, I'll get right to it. And he says, what do you mean when you land? I said, well, I live in Toronto. I got to go back home today. I'm going to fly back on the last flight. He goes, hold on a second. Did you fly down here to have coffee with me? I said, absolutely. I jumped on the 7 a.m. flight. I landed at 10:30. I got here by 11, an hour to spare to get to you by 12 o'clock. Because you telling me you flew all the way here for one cup of coffee. I said, I'll do it tomorrow if you want me to as well, because you're not going anywhere. Stay the extra night, come to the game tonight, let you join my family and watch us beat Boston. That was my first Miami Heat experience. It was my first Miami Heat game, and I fell madly in love. From that night, I got to connect with his beautiful family, from his wife, Janine, to his sister-in-law, Shakira, to his beautiful mother-in-law, father-in-law. I got to meet the kids, who are now, one being in the NBA, one NBA bound. I became Uncle Rich that night, and I've never looked back. So what's fascinating about that is that Juwan and I went on to go and launch the very first private pension plan for professional players called P5. P5, of course, because of the Fab Five. He also wore the number 5, so what a great way to honor him. P5, professional players personal pension plan, 5 Ps, and it did very well. But it brought us together as friends, as business partners for a very interesting time in his career, where, yes, he does go on to win back-to-back championship rings. I do get gifted those 2 rings. It resulted in me having the Miami Heat be an extended family of my family. Everyone that runs that organization, that owns that organization, that's in that organization is top drawer, real human beings that are all about culture. I mean, from Alonzo Mourning to Shaquille O'Neal to Steve-O to the Riley family to the Arison family. I mean, they're all just incredible to me, and I'm grateful to them for all of what they've provided and allowed me access to. But for me, what an incredible part of my journey. And that's the Juwan Howard story.
Man, what an incredible story and moment that was. But it also shows, I think, something there that's important for people to pick up. Sometimes you just know where you've got these moments in time where you just need to make that effort and take that trip. And interestingly enough, when Jim invited me to his party, I think it was happening on a Thursday. He tells me about it on a Tuesday. And here from Tampa, it's a 4.5 hour drive. But the second he asked me, I just immediately said, I'm going to this thing. I'm not going to get an opportunity like this to meet the types of people that I'm going to meet at this event and to be able to witness and celebrate Jim and everything else. So sometimes you got to make these decisions and they lead to such profound impacts in your life. So thank you for sharing that. And you named some amazing people just now, but you have also shared the stage with people like President Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, President Obama's wife, Michelle, Oprah Winfrey, Ellen DeGeneres, to name just a few. I have to ask, when I think of these people and many of the others that you just mentioned, they are examples of people who I consider to be passion struck. What are some of the common traits that you've observed in these high performers that contribute to their exceptional performance?
I mean, that's a great question. As I'm underscoring the fact that before I met Juwan Howard, I had already done a tour with President Clinton. You know, I'd already done work with President George W. Bush. I'd already begun to work with some really great icons and legends in various industries. It was bubbling, but it wasn't boiling. It was just bubbling. And I think that Juwan requires some credit, where that was a huge catalyst for me. It was almost like throwing some new fuel infused logs in the fire, so to speak. And it just like really took off. His connection and friendship, consequentially, our partnership catalyzed a lot more. So from that perspective, it really earned me a lot more credit and it gave me a lot more profile in the worlds I was already in and then some. But to your point around observation, it's interesting that in working with some of these people, I mean, today what we find is that there's lots of celebrities being paid to be at events and to take pictures and to be at dinners and or just to simply show up. And luckily for me, I was involved in various parts of the industry where I had a chance to spend a lot of time and build a lot of rapport and dare I say a friendship with some of these people that you're speaking about. Like, I mean, if you take Oprah, for example, she had a challenge with launching the OWN network. She did a worldwide tour to drum up her fans and re-engage her friends to get back onto the network to save it, which succeeded. And I was responsible for Canada. So spending a week to 10 days on the road with Oprah Winfrey was what I did. So it wasn't just a moment backstage and a picture, and in that moment I milked it or made it mean something. I spent an entire 10 days on the road with her over a period of time where I got to be with her in every single city and meet people that she loved and parts of her family. I got to have downtime with her and David's tea with her and go shopping with her. And so you get to know these people. But I wasn't so lucky with some celebrities where I got to advise on a whim. And so I want to make sure I qualify all that. So the observation I've made, which is qualified by either spending a lot of hands-on time with them to just making observations, being in their presence or having time with them, and very marginally, is that they all are feverishly focused on their commercial task. Now, it's not to say that they have tunnel vision, but when it comes to their commercial act, like whatever it is they're up to, that has their tunnel vision. It's like pulling them. It's not like they're pushing it. They're being pulled by it. So it would make you wonder, how does that cause and create them? So they take on a role, they get into character, dare I say, when it comes to that task. All of them. Politicians, members of the royal family, artists, writers, musicians, actors, producers. I mean, politicians, dignitaries. I mean, I've worked with so many people from different classes of life. That's the one thing I noticed they all share in common, is that when it's go time, it's grow time. They lock into something really, really narrowly. I've called it the zoom factor. When you look at the zoom factor, it's like the function of your telephoto lens. And for some people, they might look at their camera and say, like, that has a zoom lens as well. When you zoom in on something, when you take that which is far and you bring it close, nothing else matters. Nothing else matters. And so you get that as a military man. And I think a lot of people understand that because zoom technology is something that's been around for nearly 100 years. Taking something that's out there and bringing it right here, so that's all that matters. That's what they share all in common.
Yeah, in the book just put out, I basically have studied 750 of these people we're talking about. And it's the 12 principles that I have in the book that I have found keep coming back and back time and time again as to why their lives are different from people who don't achieve these things. And one of the things I know you talk about is urban financial philosophy. And this is how you blend financial psychology, if I understand it correctly, with the economics of happiness. Can you go into this unique approach and explain it a little bit?
No, you bet. I mean, we've been touching on it a little bit for now some time as we're chatting through just really why would someone want to be listening to this conversation? What's this got to do with my state of mind and my quality of health? And I would have to assert everything. I mean, after all, remember, I've worked with some really high-end first-class athletes, athletes in F1, Formula One racing, athletes in the NBA, athletes in the NHL, hockey, boxing. I mean, after all, I worked with Mike Tyson in his reinvention, but also helping coach him to get back in the ring at the age of 54 for the first time ever. So I would have to say that I've got somewhat of a background in understanding what it means to really shift your relationship to anything worth measuring. And one of the things that all these athletes have in common is they don't play for fun, they play to win. And financially speaking, a lot of people don't play that same game. So my urban financial life philosophy was built out of three observations. One, out of my beginnings of even being first-handedly observing financial technology and how it worked and how it failed, right? Not just from the advice, but the instruments that people put their money in, from stocks, bonds, mutual funds, puts, calls, and warrants, and all the other stuff that people are sold. I got to really understand from a psychology perspective what a financial life can look like, because I've worked with people inside research areas such as happiness economics, behavioral finance, investor resilience. I've written books on those topics. So I've gotten to understand the psychology of money. And then philosophically speaking, understanding that there's other philosophies that people are watching and looking at, like minimalism and understanding being effective and tax efficiencies. But then the last one is ontological, like the study of human beingness, where there's a real movement right now for people to be authentic and with a peace of mind and having a spiritual awakening and being connected to an inner worth. So you bring those together, to combine, it created for me an urban financial life philosophy. And here it comes. I believe that a great financial life is one that all people deserve. Not a good one, not an okay one, not a mediocre one, but a great financial life. And a great financial life is one that is whole, complete, and performing. Whole, nothing missing. Complete, nothing skipped. And performing, as in performing in the ways that you need it to be. Not how others tell you it should be, but the way you need it to be. So when you break down what makes up a financial life, we touched on this already, John. It's comprised of money, wealth, and worth. A lot of people think that it's all about money, but what about your wealth? Or some people think it's all about wealth, but what about your worth? So money is defined by currency, your spendability, your spending power. It's measured by currency or credit. I've met a lot of people with a lot of money, but they have zero wealth. Then I've met a lot of people who've got a lot of wealth, beautiful home, great things, nice stuff, significant, sexy, shiny. But I've met a lot of people with a lot of wealth with no money. So just because you got a lot of really nice, shiny things doesn't mean you've got a lot of spending power. I see that a lot in real estate, right? House rich, money poor. But worth is the one stage of one's financial life that it seems like we're all gravitating towards. Like if it were to have an arc, it would end up there. And having worth is all about a life worth, the value you give to and get from life, being a contribution, having control over your time and the freedom of choice and the power to choose. That's really where we all want to end up. Be able to work if we want, go where we want, when we want, on our own terms. Make sense? So what's funny though is it's easy to say that now after I've got the wealth I need and after I've got the money I've needed to earn. It's hard to tell that to a 20-year-old. All of 20, when I was 20, it's all I want was show me the money. I just want money. Do you know, Rich, if you work hard, you're going to be able to have a nice big house. I couldn't care less. I wanted money. Show me them Lincolns. I mean, that's all it was really about. But when you hit that stage, you fall in love and you want to settle down, yeah, a house matters. Having a nice car matters. Having a vacation home would be lovely. But then when you hit the next stage in your life, you start to really realize what the value of life really is all about. And that's having the freedom of choice and having freedom of your time. So to me, that is the overarching conversation that we're having. This is why we re-entered the financial services space, not to innovate or disrupt the industry. We have no interest in doing that, but to embrace those who believe it deserves it. So we're not looking to disrupt the industry. We're looking to create our own. We want to have our own gated community. We want to create our own private island of people who believe that a financial life, having it be great, is good. We want to make sure that people know how to grow money, wealth, and worth in the ways that matter. We want people, here comes John, lean in. It's all about growing richer in the things that matter most, no matter what. And I think the world is ready for that conversation more than ever before. Would you agree?
Oh, I would totally agree. And if I had to summarize today's discussion, it really is a mastermind class in shifting from chasing results to becoming the source of results, which I know is something that you advocate for.
Well
So,
said, my friend. Well said.
so to close us out today, if a listener wants to learn more about you, where is the best place that they can go to do so?
Yeah, they can check me out. They can go to my website, Richard Dolan, last name spelled D as in Delta, OLAN.com, or they can check me out on Instagram, Richard.Dolan, and that's easy too. But really, look, man, you and I are brothers in arms. And I think this is not going to be the first conversation we'll have. It'll be the first of many that we're going to have. And I love what you're doing at Passion Struck. I love that you're mobilizing great thinkers and leaders, innovators and disruptors, but fellow human beings like you and I that are really committed to igniting the passion within people that they should know is already there. And we just need to light it up. So, John, I know this will be the first of many conversations to come. So I want to take this opportunity to thank you for having me on your show and within your community. I'm looking forward to you coming on mine. and so that you can be with my family and my community.
And I would love that. And it was such an honor having you here today. Thank you so much for joining us. And I can't wait to do more of these in the future.
My pleasure, my friend. God bless.
What an incredible interview that was with Richard Dolan. And I wanted to thank Richard for the honor and privilege of joining me on today's show. You're about to hear a preview of the Passion Struck podcast interview that I did with Eric Edmeades, a revolutionary thinker in the worlds of health and wellness. Eric, who's the author of the new book, Post-Diabetic, is a renowned speaker who shared the stages with people like Tony Robbins, Oprah Winfrey, and so many more. And we dive into the profound exploration of understanding our relationship that we have with food, pivotal role of metabolism, and its connection with our mind for unparalleled health and vitality.
Everybody has a genetic predisposition for type 2 diabetes. And the reason everybody has this is that everybody evolved the ability to manage sugar differently in the autumn in order to prepare them for the winter. Everybody, all humans develop this. Now, some of us have it stronger than others, of course, but every single one of us behaves the same way if we eat too much sugar too consistently for too long a time. We slow our metabolisms down. We increase our cravings for sugar. We start storing excessive amounts of sugar. Our cells start refusing to accept the sugar in, insulin sensitivity problems, and we start storing fat. Pretty much everybody goes through that cycle. The question is, how far can you push it? Some people can't push it that far and they instantly get there. And in a sense, they're the lucky ones. They immediately start seeing the problems. Other people, it takes a little longer, but they still get there. So I would say this, humans have a predisposition toward developing diabetes on the whole, on the mass, and all of us should be taking the precautions to prevent it from happening.
Remember that we rise by lifting others, so share this show with those that you love and care about. And if you found today's episode, Richard Dolan, engaging and inspirational, then definitely share it with those that you love and care about. In the meantime, do your best to apply what you hear on the show so that you can live what you listen. Now, until next time, go out there and become passion struck.